How are my angles?
Sexy.
You know, like that, like, you know, like. Okay, it's been a long time, you guys, and I know I've had like a lot of feedback either on our YouTube platform or my social media as far as where'd you go, what's happened, all this. And really, you know, Joey and I both, Joey's my partner in crime with all of our content as far as YouTube and editing and stuff. And between the both of us, we've had stuff going on. I have this in my hand because this was part of my life for the last 2 months. New Year's Eve, I was riding with my son Logan in El Mirage. We were up in the hills. We went on our first ride in the morning. I did some dumbass dad stuff and like tried to, you know, like, look what I can do. You know, if you put your mind to it, you can do this. And then we were in like a sand wash and there was embankments on the sides, and I went up one side and my bike was backwards. I had already ate shit. He pulled up behind me and I went to turn my bike around. It was so narrow that I didn't really want to turn around there. I was going to go up this cliff and then jump off of it and be turned around. Go up it, he's right there, and then I go up and I go off this cliff. It's like 5 feet. And I dig in, and being the goofball that I am, I offloaded and I like Mortal Kombat punched a rock. Just like a paver stone in the sand wash. It had just rained, everything was compact. And I like right away, boom, like lightning bolts through my fingers. And I like I pressed on it like this because I'm like, oh, and I pressed on it, something moved. And I'm like, oh, it's just dislocated. Had quite a bit of trouble getting back, you know, rode with one hand. Had to have someone help load all of our equipment into the back of the truck. This is all New Year's Eve. And then went to an urgent care, got x-rays, saw, I think this is the ulna. There's the radius and the ulna. But pretty much that, like the cup that holds your wrist, the whole thing broke off. So I have a really nice incision here where they, you know, my surgeon, she actually lined up the tattoos and stuff and got that back, but there's 9 screws and a plate in there. And you know, I think it's been 6 weeks since the surgery and I'm back in full steam. But in between that time, which has felt like forever, it has been a huge, I don't know about a struggle, but it's just been a complete like change of pace and challenge because you know, right when that happened, the first thing you go is like, oh my gosh, I work with my hands. What do we do? What are we supposed to do? And that's why we're going to talk about Kevin's truck first, because that was one of the, you know, I had got, let's just go into that. New Year's Eve, this thing happens. Kevin, this is Kevin Betancourt's and his partner Chris's 6100 truck, just a bare bones roller. Originally, I want to say close to a year ago, Kevin had hit me up about doing the instrumentation, like the dash shapes and the center console and some of the tin work on this thing. He is extremely passionate and extremely motivated and organized and just a solid human. But back to this incident, and then we're going to close this thing out. We don't even talk about this anymore. I had the car here. We were slow to start on it. We were like 8 weeks slow on starting on it. We had stuff going on and finishing Vivian and blah, blah, blah. Didn't get to it. And then I had a phone call the Friday, you know, before New Year's Eve and before this incident where Kevin's like, well, you know, I just made a bunch of commitments. Hey, I'll have these drawings done. You know, we'll be able to move forward, this and that, and just fully on track. And on top of that, my health was optimal. Physically, just going to the gym every day, feeling awesome. And then boom, that injury happens. So now we're here. I was unable to use my wrist for a long time, and I am left-handed, so it was a heavy hit. But the good part is we've, like with this build especially, we've started in like a spot where it was slower and shittier and not the progress that I'm sure Kevin or myself was expecting. And then it's turned into something where we're really able to bust our ass and eliminate a lot of stuff on this. I'm gonna kind of brief you guys on this thing. And you know, the other thing to think about too is this is a spec trophy truck. We do not do race vehicles. I don't intend on doing any more race vehicles. This one is special just because it is, you know, it's all the best parts. Kevin's a special guy, and I have a very special opportunity on this thing to work with Ben Walker and work on aerodynamics and airflow research and really Days of Thunder the fuck out of this thing. Part of this thing's a challenge, and it's not like it's a bad challenge or a negative or it's something where it's a problem, but it is a challenge because we do a lot of high-end design work and functional design work, but usually on a level of aesthetic and finish work of pre-runner or like some, you know, production style vehicle versus like a race vehicle where there's a different like method with how you need to do things where, you know, lighter, always keep weight in mind, keep simplicity in mind, keep serviceability in mind. So it's just like anything else. It is just a design challenge, and I love those. We live for those. So with Kevin, like we talked about, we were going to just do the tin work and the dash stuff and center console. When he got the chassis back, he's like, are you in a position where you can just finish the whole truck out? Now, when I say finish, I don't mean wiring and plumbing. I just mean like make this thing a complete truck that's ready for plumbing and wiring. And of course, yep, we can. But it does, like, it made me nervous at first because, especially with Kevin, he is extremely thorough. This is his dream vehicle. It's his dream race truck. And he's thought about this thing day in and day out. So like it presses me, and on top of that, he's a good fabricator. So it's like I'm always like very conscientious about how I'm doing things, and really what's worked well is like our line of communication is just extremely high, where I talk about where each part needs to go, why the part is there, what needs to be done with serviceability there, what's the priority level with serviceability. Like even the stuff what I would think I would know it, I still will double down and circle back with him on it to verify that we're getting the most optimal result with everything. So I did kind of start a list here just to go through all the stuff we have done, and then I have stuff that we will be working on that are in progress. We've kind of, you know, another thing for like a design studio, I like to call this a studio, is being able to move things around to favor and prioritize like the workload or what we're doing. So that's why it's very open in here. For Colin and I both to work on this thing. We've had Alvaro and Alex work on this thing too, but right now it's been very streamlined for Colin and I to just be slamming on this thing. Colin's extremely efficient with bracketry, with tabbing, and on top of that, now that my wrist is back, I can really just help him. Like, you know, he can generalize a template, and then I can detail the thing out and give it back to him. Boom, he can bang the thing out and on to the next thing. And so it's a power team situation on this. We've made some serious gains, and we're just in the throes of it right now. So I'd love to kind of strip this down, take the body off. The body is a Mason body. Kevin was really pressing to have the old Robbie Gordon, like Riviera, Valvoline 97 F-150 body on this thing, but it was just extremely hard to get. It just didn't pan out right. And so the next best thing visually and aero wise was the Mason body. It is a gorgeous body. Again, I'm not a race truck person. Don't hold me to that. Pre-runners are cool. I like things that represent a manufactured automobile that have a sealed cab, but this is a special ticket item, and it's just one more thing in the portfolio where this truck is all the best components. Everything in here is the best parts you can put on this class of vehicle, and we are putting the best design into this, and to my knowledge, the best forethought into everything that we're putting in here and why we're putting it where, etc., and having the best people we can on this. So I have high expectations with this vehicle and hopes of it being a top contender and competitor in Spec truck. One of the items I want to press on before we remove the body panels is the bedside mount. I feel like these things are a consumable item and they're always flimsy and like they come off, and then like a lot of times there's always like a side impact here, or there's something where you know, either another vehicle collides or you slap this thing and something, but it's always a contact point here. And what happens is like the bedside gets damaged, then the antler that's like welded on the chassis, that gets damaged. Then you're cutting that thing off. Then you're rebending it or resticking it. It's ugly in the first place. So coming up with a design maybe where you can have a swinging structure with an aluminum tube that's kind of a consumable, where when this thing has a side impact, it can just crunch into there. The bedside is no matter what coming off, but you're not having to redo a bedside mount over and over and redo tabs. You're just replacing one aluminum tube that just has 2 holes in it. So I just wanted to have this shown here before we remove the panels for good to kind of dissect the rest of the car. The list goes as follows. Yeah, lists. The list goes as follows. Tube structure, rear chassis, bedside mounts, folding, limit straps, chassis side, limit straps, axle side, AC blowers, secondary seat mounts, harness tubes, strike pads, throttle modules, steering column, brake master, brake reservoir, gas pedal, cutoffs, brake bias, front tin, floors, AGM jack pump with custom tank, front reservoir mounts, the cooler order, and the siren mount. That's all stuff we've done right now. I'm probably forgetting some stuff, but oh well. I am going to cover that stuff. Again, there's not really a priority order on us covering it. There is kind of a priority when we're building the stuff. Like ideally, you'd want to build this thing from like the inside out. These are Race Tech seats. Typical composite shell seat, and obviously full containment, meaning like, you know, you have slappers on the side of your helmet there as bumpers. One thing I really love about these seats is the secondary mounting provisions here on the back face, so like your vertical face near your shoulders. So that was one of the things we wanted to integrate. We have like a pretty complex situation up here. Packaging, again, key on this thing. Where to fit stuff, where is it going to make sense, where's air going through, where is air not going through, where is stuff going to get intake from and exhaust air from. There's a lot of that, and just making space where you can work on the stuff and getting the most out of the space. So I just want to point that out. There is a port here for seat cooling. I don't know if we'll run that. We do have an AC blower system for the helmets that's also in this same area, this provision here. So I think we'll cover that right now. And then we'll move to the tube structure that I talked about. This nook back behind the seat, we wanted to try to get as many winds as we could into one small space. So you can see the AC blowers, which those are actual air conditioning unit per helmet that goes in and gives cool, fresh air. Very similar to like a vintage air style unit, but very compact. They're pricey, guys. They're extremely nice pieces, but we wanted to be able to nestle them in somewhere where they do have an intake portion. So you can see like the screen on these guys is your intake, and then they have the exit. And there is a certain orientation they're supposed to be laid out where they're not, like some people mount these things where they're vertically mounted, and it requires, like for optimal use and longevity on them, they need to be mounted flat like that. So we wanted to get a pedestal made. We wanted to locate the seat mounts, the secondary seat mount here with 4 ways of adjustment. We wanted to get a harness tube, and we wanted to get the eyelets in the right spot. And that's also eyelets based off of what they require for the degree of the harnesses for the shoulder straps. There is actually specific angle, like a threshold of angle that you're supposed to get in, and I don't remember offhand right now. If you go to impact safety and you look, there is kind of prerequisite setups that you need to have with that, where it's not just like, oh, put them back behind your shoulders and it works. It's not like that. There is an actual way for optimal safety to have your harnesses for your shoulders, and the lap belt portion of the harness, and also the submarine strap. There's like a actual science to that where they work the best. So we wanted to float this little area, and that's kind of what we accomplished here, but there's just a lot of complex stuff going on. You can kind of see that. But it really consolidates your space into just that small package there. And I'll go into the car too. Something else to look at too is design-wise, like even with the brackets. And I guess that goes with this whole chassis, is we wanted to try to pay respects to the original design language of the car, which this is very like typical off-road style fabrication, like just through holes, nothing crazy. And you know, there was a lot of like kind of, I guess, compound curves here instead of like angular stuff. So really, like the shock mounts are your big focal piece of this chassis. You can see like there's some like nice radius gusset saddle work, but you know, the through holes are a thing. They're in different areas. It's just, that's like a typical builder style thing. So running shapes was, you know, we wanted to stick with something like that and then just put our twist on it. So something else to look at too is like even the brackets of the AC pump or the blower itself, like we wanted to look at that and the cutouts there and kind of keep the triangulation through all of our bracketry. Just so when it's all together, it all makes sense and it doesn't look like someone else built on top of something and they don't match. One of the other things we wanted to consider, like if you look at this chassis, it is extremely lightweight. There's definitely structure and strength where it needs. Like you can see there's 2-inch on all the mains of the cage. And then a lot of like, look at 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch outside runner tube, 1.5 inch center down tubes, and then everything transitions into 1.75 inch. If you look through here though, let me adjust my step. If you look at this section, so this portion, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all that was not there. This was one big open square, right? And that just, there was something for all of us kind of saying we needed to put more structure in here. And the reason that it looks like this is to favor not only the radiator, but also to favor the housing in the upper links at full compression. So it's kind of got like a elevated, let me show you the other side. It's kind of got an elevated plane to it, right? Where there's this bottom tube that's like your bump stop, lower bump stop tube. And then it goes up because when the axle comes up at full compression, everything gets very close to here. So it's really, the chassis is tailored to the functionality of the suspension in the rear. And we added all that stuff. Obviously kept the same thing going. 1.75 inch, 0.95, 1.5 inch, 0.95. Just thin wall tubing and just keeping the same kind of concept going with the whole thing and keeping things on a diet. One of the things I started on before I clapped out the old wrist was the bedside mounts. No matter what, with vehicles, just having that fixed, like that antler, or it's just off the car welded, like it's just a stick coming off, or it's like a structure that's welded on. I can't justify that or make sense of that. And so always, like however you're gonna do it, just either a sleeve, you know, some kind of a female on the chassis and then a male that goes in with like a capture bolt. That makes sense for me. And you know, especially like with pre-owners and stuff where you wanna have the bedsides off, maybe for the sand or for paddles or just for the cool look, then just pop them off and don't have antlers. So retaining some kind of a bolt register or you know, a bulkhead here for each mounting location is optimal. With this, again, like there's some pretty cool machine parts for the fuel cell hold down. So really like capitalizing on sectioning this stuff to kind of flow right, you know, like bolt, having design and all that, really, you know, design. That's where we're at. So this thing swings on a plane, right? So this bolt is kicked and it's on the same kick as this one down here. And these are both the same kind of design as far as, you know, like a three-sided thing, broke over, welded bottom. Same here, right? Broke over, welded bottom. And then what's going on is this structure, this is all 3/4 120. It is rigid. The impact, like I talk about, is really gonna come from the side here, from the back, or even from, you know, this, like, you know, if your tires here come from this section and push. So what's going on is this all swings. You have another register back here, and you have an aluminum tube that's just chilling here. And what's going on is that's a thin wall aluminum tube. It's still super rigid, but when this has an impact, the kink in here in this tube is built to crunch. So instead of like the whole bedside mount failing and having to redo it, really what you're doing is this tube is just gonna, this whole thing is engineered to swing into the chassis. This goes back and goes to about right here. This tube has like almost a limit strap, so it's forced to fold right where it needs to, and it kind of glides on this, and it comes back, and then it just holds the bedside mount in there. So when you've had the impact or collision or whatever, you might lose your bedside, but your mount is just back in there, and then boom, when it comes time to service the truck, put new bedsides on, do all that, you're just taking this tube that you already, and we've already made 4 pairs of those tubes already, so it's already. So we can just pop that guy out, reset the bedside where it goes, put that in. You already know your spread, you know, your length from A to B, and that's your consumable. That's as much as you need to do. Just for the level of stuff that we do, it just doesn't make sense to like build something really nice and then risk everything by using like a low grade nutsert where it can slip in its spot, or if you counter thread, you know, someone's taken something on and off a couple times and it counter threads and it starts to just, you know, it gets stuck in the nutsert and then everything spins, and it's just a terror to have to get those things out and to service them. So spending that extra money on something like a nut plate here, you know, this is also a replaceable, serviceable item. So these things are extremely strong. We use them like obviously you can buy some of these tabs pre-made where they have the nut plates in them, like from CarTech or something. And also we buy the nut plates themselves, floating nut plates and regular ones. And then we just build out whatever we need to with, like, you know, our whole layout and our pattern and install them. And they're such a great option for areas where you either want to buzz something off, like a bedside mount, where you want to take that thing off from the outside and not have to reach around and capture the backside with, you know, a wrench or something. You just want to buzz it off. Or if you're building a structure where you can't get to the backside, those are optimal to put in first, and you're in a good spot. All right, I think while we're talking about the rear of the truck, we can go on limit strap stuff. And, you know, it's all basic stuff, but we cover everything. That's what we do, we're thorough. So let's get back under here. This car will use an AGM jack system, which is super high-end, hydraulic, redundant system. Runs off its own pump, powered by, it's an electric to hydraulic system. So you'll turn that thing on, you'll have a lever, and you will be able to jack up the vehicle, either driver or passenger side. The jacks themselves will be mounted, they're pretty tall, so they'll probably start at the upper portion of the B-pillar here, and they'll span down, and then they'll come right about here with a pad. And you can see, if you look way up there, the pads are up there, then those are the jacks. They're close to 4 feet. But about that, the pump itself is located back here, and it's nestled in this little home. Again, you can kind of just check out, like when we go through this stuff, just look at design as far as our bracketry. All of it is kind of speaking the same language. And something else with this pump is the tank itself. These The pumps are good and the motor is good, but the tank itself is like the #1 will fail. Talking with Geyser Brothers and a couple other manufacturers that run these systems, you got to replace the tank. So what we did is we not only replaced the tank, but we optimized the capacity in it, and we bumped it up to 2.5 gallons, and it's tailored to fit in the vehicle. So if you see like all OEM stuff here, then we have our bracket, all 1/8 inch. A lot of the stuff we were doing 90 thou, but some of the bigger stuff, and especially in the compression zone where the truck is going to be bumping right here, and bumping, I mean like, you know, hitting the bump stops, constant impact. We just want to have something really rigid. And you can see all OEM stuff, and then this tank is extremely tailored. Fit in here, and that is all 063 chromoly plate. So we're gonna run a Geyser Brothers fill. That fill will live here. We'll probably notch like a tube here and then have the cap come out. We might even have it come up quite a bit for serviceability reasons. This thing also does come out. So the radiator is probably gonna start from this saddle area and this tube, and it's gonna span up. It's gonna be laid back, and it's gonna go and mount to the top, like the down tubes here. So imagine that. And then you go, well, how do you get this out? We didn't want to build this tank to the point where you had to separate its pump from the tank itself. That would just be a mess and the darkest of arts. So we have this thing engineered where it actually goes through the bottom of the chassis here, and it doesn't need to come out through this window. So then when the radiator has its footprint here, it's not going to be an issue for this thing to come out by itself as a redundant system. Another thing when packaging, like when you get a roller chassis where it's just bare bones, is really figuring out where all the accessories and all the parts fit. And it's the same thing with like our limit straps. Wanting to run an adjustable clevis, you can see this portion, like we have our tank cleared for that, right? Or that's, you know, that's our clearances. And you can see the bigger portion, but these are all like nice boxed kick things where it's built for droop. So when the suspension's completely out, like this will be perfectly in line with the axle because the clevis will live in this part. With the limit straps, there's also the compression zone and the bump stop stuff. So there's like a nylon pad on the bottom of the bumps. That's a consumable. It's not like a pad that just lives there forever, especially on like a race vehicle. These things do go out and you do have to replace them. So when you build this stuff at full compression where the bypass and the coilover are all the way up, you want to still make sure that there's a little bit of space here. So I would, you know, section some off, like for us, a half inch out of this thing is where you're going to visually be able to inspect it and go, okay, we need to replace it. But you don't want to build it where the coilover and the bypass are fully compressed sitting on the nylon right here, because that will go out, and it'll go out quickly, and then you're going to start having damage and repair and service on the shocks because you're going to be bottoming the whole car with the shock. You know, and that's going to lead to problems. So we needed to space this off of, you know, of where it was. So then when it does compress, we needed to have like a spacer in there. So when it's compressed and this starts going away, we're not just riding the shocks into oblivion. With that being said, we got a pretty good opportunity to get a win in here with the strike pads. So what was in here before was a hardened, like a stock, probably a 2.5 inch round stock, hardened material, just welded, you know, like it was pretty much just a circle under here, a cylinder that was notched into the axle tube. And, you know, we got to think, well, shoot, we want to put a 1/2 inch strike pad on here, but we do need to have a removable section of it where we can have like some kind of threaded portion so this thing can be fastened to the axle. With that, if we're doing that, you know, we already have that hardened piece in there. We can't drill and tap into the hardened piece because of obvious reasons. It's just going to screw the pooch. So coming up with a shape where, if you think about there, you know, there's a 2.5 inch piece of stock in here. So we think, okay, well, how can we add to that? So what's going on with this thing is this portion is actually, you know, we have the boxed areas that we've added on each side, but really there's still like this area that you see here is all still that cylinder. And then we've just filled it, like we put a couple passes in here, blended it, and then just welded it all the way through so it looks all as one piece. And it's, you know, it's things like that that are extremely satisfying to myself and the team, just to get like a win like that where it doesn't look like something where you added on. You know, that's the worst scenario, is when it looks like an afterthought. And coming up with solutions to make everything be uniform, even if it is an afterthought, is just awesome. So you can see the limit strap provisions here. Everything on the axle, you know, I always say it's like cheating with welding, because when you weld do like a thick axle tube or any kind of thick material, you get really good color, and the you know, the heat, it takes the heat well, and it really gets you confident in your skills or something. But anyways, you can see double passes on everything. This thing is ready to go to Evan Weller. AJ is gonna do his magic assembling the axle and getting, you know, all the brake, they'll do all the brake lines and everything. So really, we wanted to just get some of these parts off and going so there's progress on multiple ends, and that's where we're at with the axle. So the housing's done. We already have everything we needed. Like, we needed to have this for the bed sides, we needed to have it for limit straps, we needed to have it for this chassis structure that we added in here, we needed to have it for the pump, and now we know everything. Okay, throttle module, steering column, brake master, brake reservoir, gas pedal, cutoffs for the brake, and the brake bias. Those were all kind of something we wanted to try to get in one, and use the least amount of tabbing to get the most amount of wins per area. And there's also, and the steering, I think I said the steering column, but that, like, that's a lot of cluster of stuff to get hung and mounted, and trying to get like 2-for-1s, or trying to get just some bracketry that all works together and feels good was key. So we put a lot of thought into that. Kevin came, he sat in the vehicle, we fit the whole thing to him. That's kind of what you do with your clients, especially on like bigger builds, is I need to have them come in, I need to have them sit and feel the car, feel where the seat is, feel what's comfortable, feel their driving position, feel the steering wheel, the angle of the steering wheel, where their foot controls are, where they're happy with that stuff. You have to think like these cars are a big investment, and just thinking, oh, this will be fine and that'll work for that and he'll be fine with that. That's not how that goes. If this is their beautiful piece of machinery that we're building for them, then they need to be fit to this thing just like a suit. So that's what we dialed in first. We set everything we wanted. The string that you see in here, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see it kind of tied off to the secondary A-pillar here. That's the line of sight. And it's crazy because it's right here if you can't see it. And that's all Kevin needs and his co-dog Chris need to actually see through the car, see over the front clip, see everywhere where it's not compromised. And that's kind of, that's going to be the sight line for a lot of the dash and instrument panel. Something else too is having a GPS was very important for Kevin to have as his primary display for driver side controls. So I can kind of get into this stuff. All right, so there's quite a bit going on here. You can see, you know, this is a spec truck. It does have a sealed LS3, so it does need to be drive-by-wire, not drive-by-cable. With that being said, there does need to be there needs to be a throttle module. A lot of people run a redundant one as like a backup, and you want to be able to also change that thing on the fly. So you want to be able to just, you know, unplug here and plug in, and that should just be a driver side thing because these do fail. They're just a factory GM part. And the other thing too is we have a Mason Motorsports pedal under here that's custom built to Kevin's shoe size. And we built linkage that gets the exact throw. When he was fitted in here, we not only fit him for where his foot was comfortable in here, but also for how much we want to deploy the throttle pedal and how much of the actual shock we're going to use. And yes, that is a real coilover with real valving. So that when you figure that the throw of the throttle cable or the throttle pedal out, then you also need to figure out like how much of an extension of the linkage are we going to use where this thing works. So we have it perfect. Again, you can kind of see how tight all the packaging gets already, and we wanted to have this thing be directly in line. So got that one. That's one thing we had to float, right? Because we couldn't just build the bracket for this thing. So we had to float this. We figured out the steering column had to float that. The other thing is the GPS mount. So all of that GPS mount is integrated into the steering column hanger on the chassis. So, you know, if you unbolt, you pull these two bolts out, you can get the mount for the GPS out and the steering column. The other thing we wanted to have incorporated was the master or the brake reservoir, which is another Geyser product. And there will be cutoff valves right here. So that's also something you can get with your hands real quick and easy. One more thing that's a Geyser product is the brake bias. So that's mounted here. And that's, I don't know if you can see it, but that's a hand bias for front to rear distribution on the brakes. Then the other thing is hanging this pedal. We have this Everson pedal, obviously made a custom pad for it that also represents the angles that you'd be deploying this thing, right? And everything, again, you know, if you check the packaging, like where this deploys, you know, the height of this compared to the floor, you know, your clearance is here, your Zeus button clearance, and then also making sure that you're using all of the masters, Brembo masters, and then your brake bias will go here, making sure that that all clears and doesn't hit the sheet metal. So there's a lot of stuff like that to be said here, but you can kind of see like the styling. We really tried to trickle the design all the way through everything, where it doesn't just, you know, this isn't just a tab or a plate, some basic shit, and then this is a tab and plate. Like everything has a flow to it where it's all, you know, designed with purpose and functionality. Something else to note is the fire suppression, Safecraft fire suppression, 10-pound bottles on each side. They tuck nicely under the seats. If you kind of look at tolerances again, I mean, you know, that's what we're talking about here. And just finding a home for everything. Obviously, this is your paddle shift actuator for the transmission. We will have a redundant one as well. So this will have a cable that goes right to the trans. The driver's side will have the same program, and then you'll just swap the cables out. These will live in the car. So if one goes bad, you can just pull up, swap the cable out, pop the panel off, which is an easy access panel. Take it off on the driver's side and swap those out. So you can see this is all integrated. Again, clearances. You know, everything is fit perfectly where it needs to. This comes out without having to get around the bottle or without having to take any of the sheet metal off. And you can kind of see I've started on the tin work on the floors and the firewall. Okay, front 10 floors, AGM jack pump with tank, front reservoir mounts we haven't covered yet. The cooler order, the siren mount, okay, cool. So we're pretty close on the stuff that we have accomplished. I'm gonna get with current stuff right now. And I also wanna touch briefly on exhaust and header design. With a spec truck, it is like, a lot of my stuff is like design and creative based and artistic based. And with stuff like headers, there's a fine line with that stuff, especially with performance. When you are in a spec class and you have restrictions on a lot of different things, just like the powertrain, then designing like a header that is optimal flow is huge. I learned the hard way with that. Keith Smith, I did the headers on Keith Smith's truck. He was gonna, I don't know where it is now, but he was going to build a Blitzkrieg chassis truck to race 6100 in. I did the headers, I did tri-wide, but I didn't do my research. Not being stubborn, just not knowing. I don't have you know, I think that part of just growing as a business and being a professional with your career is seeking other professional assistance with stuff, and not just thinking, oh, I got it, or you got it all figured out. That's not the case. And if you can put more brain into one thing by, you know, networking and reaching out to people, then you should. Like, you're going to get the optimal result like that. So Keith Smith's, I did like a tri-Y, which is what these engines want, but I didn't really take into account the length of the primaries and the secondaries, and even the tertiary portion. And I also didn't hit the firing order the right way. And like, that can be a 30 horsepower decrease right there, just on header. So, and I said what I said, try me. That being said, we're doing this all the way right, and we're working with Ben Walker of Walker Performance. He has been extremely helpful with me, and I've built a relationship with him where he's let us really have some awesome insight into what we need to do, how we need to do things, the technical side, the numbers, and also the aero. And I haven't touched much on the aerodynamics, but there is a untapped resource here with race vehicles, and especially not unlimited trophy truck, but spec trophy truck, where you get what you get. You get this setup, you get that engine, like you get that trans, blah, blah, blah. So you do have completely unlimited body. And, you know, we're talking about, like, this is essentially just a brick going through the air. And if there's ways to make that air go either through or over or around this thing faster, then we're going to do everything we can to do that without building a complete custom body. So let's cover the front cooler, or the reservoirs, and then we'll talk about the coolers that we ordered. I guess something too, before we do that, is the tin work. I have started some pretty dynamic tin work. This does favor the headers because I know what's going to happen. They're going to collect here. They're going to merge into the tri-Ys. There's not going to be a lot of room because the tire's going to come up for compression, especially at lock. So we're going to have to kind of barrel through this and around, drop down, and then run alongside and dump out. And that being said, like, I didn't want to just do flat panels. If I could get some wins with putting like a concave surface into this stuff, I will execute it, and I did. And that's why, like, the brake, even like the structure for the brake master and the pedal, like, all of this is extremely tight in here. The other thing is it's in multiple pieces. So instead of just building a big shape that's robust and hard to get out, I've done stuff in a way where you can service the engine. Like, if you look in here too, like this, the shapes through here, this panel can live here, and then this can come out, so you can get to like your spark plugs, you can get to your header, everything. Obviously that explains itself, that's wide open. And then what I'm, you know, getting at is, like, that doesn't have to get worked out of the car until you're really disassembling stuff. So if you have to go in for service, it's always something to think about, like, how can you get to areas? And it's the same with, like, this little cap can come off. If you have to get the headers out, you know, if the headers are so tight, then maybe you have to have some panels come out before you get the headers out. So, like, all that stuff has to be thought about in advance instead of just building layers into this thing where it's a pain in the dick to get everything out. One thing we wanted to do is get all the reservoir mounts dialed for the front and figure out, like, things to consider. Let me get something for tangent. Taper bay. Something to think about here is building, like, instead of just mounting these things, again, like, how are the panels going to go? What's that going to look like? What are the surfaces? So I want to make sure, like, okay, well, we're going to do a panel here, make sure that nothing touches. You know, if you look in there, Joe, like, you can see, you know, that's all planned for, right? So if you look at, like, I don't know if you can see the reservoir mount here, like the clamp-on style Chingas that King sells. We have that, but this is an extended one. Colin extended these and blended them, so it doesn't look like it's modified, but we extended these maybe about an inch, so they do what we want here. Little details like that, finding symmetry, staggering this stuff, thinking about, like, approach angle, making this all clean where nothing's gonna hit it, nothing's gonna stick out. You know, sometimes I see, like, frame rail trucks and they have a reservoir pointing out by the bumper. So just figuring out where stuff makes sense, and then, you know, like, also where packaging is going to be for sheet metal in here. So, like, everything's clear in here. The siren is here. It's away from any of the crunch zone. It's away from the skid plate crunch, where it's going to just have a home that's safe. it's just a matter of thinking about stuff. Cooler, so it's got Charlie's billet box on here. If you go back to our Chasing Passion series, you can kind of check on power steering solution and sit down with Charlie and hear his story. But besides that, we are packaging CNR coolers for this thing. So they will be custom spec to what we need. They're not off-the-shelf items. CNR or PWR, they have been extremely helpful with this thing. They support this whole program. So power steering cooler here, custom reservoir tank with fill to the back. I don't know if I probably just need to get in there. So your typical, like I know a lot of these things do have a typical kind of like a cooler area here, and that's what we're still gonna do, but we're gonna run, you know, the trans cooler will be about 2/3 of this portion here, and then the oil cooler will be on the driver's side. They'll all be in line, and they'll kind of occupy this whole wall at an angle. Then something like design-wise for the tin work will be really nice is instead of having that typical sheet metal on like this B-pillar wall up here where it's like, oh yeah, put a panel and mesh in, we're not gonna have that. This will be wide open. So if you think about that, you'll have air coming in for the trans coolers that's kind of behind the seats. This will be all mesh behind the seats and wide open. And then what you'll have is a partition. So if you look at these two planes, right, this tube and this tube, this plane will go all the way up, and this will be all sheet metal. There will not be mesh or panel like we talked about here. And then you'll have a laid over radiator, a big old 40-inch guy. Whoa. And that guy will live here, and that's where you'll get your airflow. So you'll just have like, you know, some kind of sheet metal mesh panel that'll protect it, but it won't be something back here. And it'll kind of open up like a really nice spatial void back behind the seats. Like I said, we have an extreme sheet metal package going on this thing. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme. It's something I look forward to, and it's an exciting process, but you know, the back of this thing will have quite an extensive amount of like aero work on it, and that's for a different time. But right now, let's kind of get out of here and talk about forward momentum. List-wise, that's everything that I wanted to cover. In progress. Right now we have tin work, AGM jacks, intake, dash sketches, passenger DPS mount, jack mount, just like your typical jack mount, drive shaft mount, light mounts, full Baja Designs package, everything you can think of. Tin work, dash sketches, pressure relief valve. So pressure relief valve is for the power steering. It's ID Designs unit. Hold on. All right, so this big Chingaderas. Rude. Ugh. If I was working construction, I'd blame someone. No, it's Charlie's fault, dude. Blah. So this guy's gonna nestle itself in front of the bulkhead here. Like so. Whoa, I'm jammed. There we go. Like so. You don't really need to get to this thing. Just need to make sure that the plumbing makes sense. But all of our power steering stuff will be centrally located up in this portion. And then obviously like our reservoir and our filler will be at the highest point. So we'll be dialed. But you know, this tin work through here will be kind of like a tunnel. It'll have your like diagonal enclosure on the outside. And then all of the middle portion won't have lights or anything through the grill. It'll all shoot up, it'll cool here, it'll extract out here. So all the engine will also have extraction, and it will not be from fiberglass, let's just say that. So everything like, you know, you'll have tin through here, and then right past where you need to like service the belt, because you want that panel to be removable for sure, to get in here and change something, change an alternator, change the belt, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll have big, nasty shark gill extraction through here. like I've mentioned, right now for me, sheet metal, I'm just gonna keep going. I have a special guest that's gonna appear to do the headers. That's gonna help me out. It's really tricky. I know Kevin's wanted to push like getting more work done. How many guys can you put on it? Can someone else come in and help with certain stuff? And that's a weird thing to do in a shop as tight as ours. We have a dynamic here that is like close-knit family. There's no drama, there's no bullshit. It is like a family here, and everybody is like, I want to say everybody's happy, but I know people go through ups and downs, but we all support each other, and we don't have like a dynamic like another shop where there's like just bullshit going on. So bringing another like person in to work with us and around us, it's a careful thing, because that could screw up. It's almost like you could poison the well, if you will. So bringing on that point is bringing someone in that can do that kind of stuff and do the headers like that. I really didn't know who that would be. Look at this handsome guy. Goodness gracious.
I tried.
And then I don't even know what to do now, you know? Whew. So bringing someone in to do the headers, that was a tricky thing, and I found someone that I absolutely can't wait to be around and work with and show you guys and introduce him. Besides that, I'm just solidifying panel work where the headers will go, so then everything makes sense, and he's able to build the proper setup based off of the sheet metal that we know we have to have here. Then the sheet metal is built to the constraints of the chassis, so it just has to work like that. I'm going to do this guy and the lower portion, and then I'm good on like enclosure panels, and then we're moving to our dash covers. And I really like to say they're almost like a hood, like a display hood, because they're not going to have a face on them. I want to keep this like open like a race car, so when you're sitting in there, come to this side, Joe. So if you think about that, like you have obviously your GPS, the center portion, we'll look at the sketches in a second, but the display here, like, you know, it doesn't have to have a face. Your typical dash would have like cowl, you know, face, little lip, all that shit. I think it's nicer to just have the cowl to serve its purpose and draw into the front of the car, but not, I don't like, it can just be a void in here. You know, you can like see through here and see the details. And I think that sense of like open feeling is a very like machine race car serviceable thing. There doesn't need to be a face on these things. If everything's mounted where it needs to be, the center stack is what will have all of the display, like for the engine telemetry, all the Motec stuff will be there, the touchpads will be there. So really like raw dog on the sides is all you need, you know, 2 GPS. Obviously we have our cutoffs here. You know, you have your module to swap over if you need to, brake bias, and it's all like within reach, super ergonomical on the driver and the co-dog. And then that'll just be like an open void. And I think that the look of it will make sense as far as the aesthetics, and then the functionality is there too. So let's look at the drawings. In no particular order, I'm just gonna start setting these up just so we can get an idea, because the next time we check in on this car is and you know, do you ever notice if you're talking about like race vehicles and stuff, the pro way to do it is, even though it's a truck, you just call it a car, because like that's how all the dudes that fuck on like a race program, oh yeah dude, I'm getting my car this, and we're bringing the car to go testing, and it's like this weird dumb slang that doesn't, because it's really a truck. Like, come on, you know. There is some stuff, like there's a couple things I can't talk about just because it's a competitive vehicle. There is stuff we are orchestrating on this thing that might set a precedent in the future of the class. As far as aerodynamics and airflow go. So I want to just be careful to not showcase that stuff until the car is being tested or it's going racing. And then at that point, it's a free-for-all. If it ends up being used on other vehicles, it is what it is, and that's just the way it works. But right now, I don't want anybody to get the jump on some of the stuff we're doing, and that's that. So let's talk about the instrument panel and the kind of center stack, I'd call that. And the hoods, like if you see, this is kind of what we mentioned, being just a open, like a display, a hood, you know, where you'll have a big GPS in here. I think, did we note that? That's on my other drawings. You know, you'll have a GPS floating in here, but there'll be a void in there. It won't need to have any kind of a faceplate to it, and then that can just come off really easily. You're not having to take anything off of the actual, like all the electronics, everything can float in the chassis, and they don't need to be buttoned into any kind of aluminum treatment. You can see that this is a higher portion than the middle, and this is kind of the side silhouette of the middle portion where the intrusion bars are, and that will house your display and your touchpads. Another, it's kind of a good reference. The intake tube and the filter is exposed. It's something with easy serviceability. Again, it's not something that's encapsulated. There's not a bunch of bullshit to get to it. It's just gonna come through. It's gonna be very obvious what that is and how to service it. It'll have a catch on the back. So this is our mock-up right here already where it is. And it'll have like a catch on the back of the filter, almost like a saddle. And you know, that will just be a hose clamp. So you'll kind of just undo the back saddle, undo the hose clamp, and then out, service. Super easy, right in front of your face. If you need to like blow it off, it'll be right there. It won't be buried under stuff. And again, it just goes with the principle of like just simple. Even though it's like maybe this is complex looking shapes and design, it's also simplified. It's also made out of, you know, 90 thou at the thickest, all chromoly, and it's all windowed, so you're reducing weight. Like it it makes sense. This is a good example of just the height of that sight line. You can see that that string is our visual, so that slot, that little turret there is all we really need to be able to see everything. And it seems really high and crazy, but it's not. That's all you need, and you just have to trust that, and then we can build all this stuff up high. And what that does too is then, as far as the air, we're not making a big void in the window opening where that air is just going to go in here and get turbulence, hit the drivers, hit the seats, hit all this crap. It's going to have a narrower slot, and the slip is going to be less, so it's going to want to go over or around instead of going in there and getting stuck. Okay, so that is pretty much the roundup on this thing right now. Again, the sheet metal will continue. I'm hoping the headers are underway for next update. The AGM jacks will be in there. We'll be pretty far along. So this is a crunch thing just to get it done, get it out. There's a ton of other projects going on. So this is just our first jump back into getting back in the swing of our Monday episodes. I hope you guys are having a good day. If you see stuff on here that you like or you want me to kind of explore more, absolutely comment on it. The Fab Diaries is, I have like a big list on the whiteboard of everything that I want to shoot for the Fab Diaries. This might not be the most optimal vehicle to do it on because we are just like trying to bang this thing out as quickly as possible. And with some of that, like the Fab Diaries, since I'm shooting all that myself and producing, you know, setting the camera and checking the mic and doing this, like the efficiency does get saturated a bit. And if I can do it on like something like the Frontier where I'm really just kind of, that's a passion project, I can navigate that a lot more. But right now, like we're just hitting this thing hard. Again, you know, you guys, thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, and thanks for the support. Hey, good morning.
What's up?
Do you know why I'm calling you?
What's up, my other son? I have a lot of sons, you know that?
Yeah, who else are your sons?
Chris Allen.
Your big bald
My
son?
buddy Mike Carrizo.
Copy. Happy birthday.
What's going on? Oh, thank you.
Hey, you know, and I do this annually, but I just wanted to thank you for getting me in the position that I'm in and teaching me things and being patient with me and accepting me even though I would fuck up so much. You know, but just really that talk of when are you going to quit building stairs and ladders and shit and do cool stuff? Like that's what you told me. That's straight up what you told me. When I came by and you did the tie rods, you did the tie rods for my Beth pre-runner.
Yeah.
And like I think you looked at some of the work or something and you're like, when are you going to stop doing ladders and stairs and come do cool shit for me or something? And like that stuck, you know?
Remember that.
Yeah. And then like the first, you know, when I came in there, I realized, oh my God, I can get paid to like do something like this and enjoy my life, you know?
Well, it's badass, dude. I'm very stoked where you're at right now. So
Yeah. Well, I think of you and I care for you, and happy birthday. And that's all I got.
thanks, Morgan.
Yep. I hope you have a good day.
Make me cry, dude.
You should cry. You know, I love you. I'm grateful for you. And you made a big difference in my life, and I'm glad I'm in a spot where I could take that and run with it and not just fuck off, and those times I went through hard times when I was working with you, and not being there consistently and just battling. I remember on my birthday. Do you remember I came on my birthday and I was late and I had my tool bag and I was shuffling on the side of the shop and I ate shit? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Whoa, dude. Yeah, like I was doing so bad, and I remember like I shuffled in. I was late, dude. I was an hour and a half late, and I remember like everybody. I not snuck in, but I started just walking in casually, and I ate shit, tripped over myself, and ate shit, spilled the whole bag, the whole thing. Oh my gosh. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I keep you in my heart, dude. And I love seeing that you have family and kids and Jen, and just it's all good.
Same, dude. I really am proud of you.
Thank you. So have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Morgan. Thank you.
Later, bro.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Got tears out of that guy. Yes.